Welcome everyone, this is Doomhammer doing another video with a 32-team franchise. I know I've been kind of doing some different games every now and then, but we're back with kind of the last step here in the off-season. This is going to be broken down into two separate videos. We're going to do the first round of the draft in order, and then the next video we will break down each team's individual draft. So to start out, we have the Seattle Seahawks, who have made a trade with the Atlanta Falcons for the Kansas City Chiefs pick. I know that sounds crazy, but last year the Chiefs traded their first-round pick this year and last year in order to move up to draft Brandon Weeden as the 22nd overall pick in last year's draft. We all know how that worked out. Kansas City had the worst record in the league and the #1 overall pick. Atlanta wasn't too hot on this pick because their interests are elsewhere. They don't really need one of these top players, and this is the 2013 draft where there wasn't really a clear consensus #1 overall pick. And so in this instance, the Seattle Seahawks wanted to move up. And so because of that, they get the first overall pick. And with that first overall selection, the Seattle Seahawks take Eric Fisher at left tackle. So in free agency, they were able to bring in like Willis McGahee, Jamarca Sanford, Chad Jackson, Cole Anderson, so forth. But the Seattle Seahawks have Eli Manning, Marshawn Lynch, and they underperformed this past season. But this year they get their anchor left tackle in Eric Fisher, and so we stay true to the real-life NFL by taking Fisher #1, but this time to the Seattle Seahawks, ironically with Kansas City's pick. Then we have the Baltimore Ravens on the clock. And Baltimore had a surprisingly terrible season last year, despite being the #1 team in last year's standings. They are now the second worst team in the league. So with that said, the Baltimore Ravens take, with the second overall pick, Ziggy Ansah, defensive end. So Baltimore has not been the dominant defense they were known for in the past. They've had some good years, some bad years, some inconsistencies. They did bring in cornerback Captain Munnerlyn to help on the defense, and most of their free agent acquisitions were on offense. They got like Louis Vasquez, Ramon Foster, Sebastian Vollmer, all on the O-line. They get Donald Brown from Arizona to join the running back field with Ray Rice. They also had like Kevin Ogletree. They even got Seth Olson. So a lot of offensive players. Where here they are bringing in Ziggy Ansah, allegedly the best pass rusher. Probably between him and Dion Jordan were the ones that were considered. But with this second overall pick, we see Ziggy Ansah coming off the board. So next up, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. And with that third overall pick, the Jaguars select Tavon Austin. So the Jaguars have been up and down. They had some rough games with Nick Foles. Colt McCoy kind of turned them around a little bit, gave them some more competitiveness, but they were really void of talent. They needed a solid weapon on offense, and they weren't able to really acquire that in free agency. They did get Fabian Washington and Tom Bahali on defense, Bobby Carpenter, but Quentin Demps. So their defense got an upgrade in free agency, but not their offense. So with that third overall pick, they went with the playmaker, the speedster, Tavon Austin, with that third pick. Now the Detroit Lions, #4, decided to take Dion Jordan. So they go with defense with this selection. The Lions are in a very tough division, that NFC North, with the Packers and the Vikings and Packers, Vikings, and Bears. Bears and Packers making the playoffs. So getting Dion Jordan there is a great addition for them on defense to boost that pass rush that is so desperately needed. Next up, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Bengals on the clock decide to go with Desmond Trufant. So they pass on Milliner, who was seen as the top-ranked cornerback, but they go for Desmond Trufant. It was more of a scheme fit here. They had a more shallow or lower free agency period. Phil Holt at right tackle. They got a kicker. They got Richard Seymour. But here they boost their defensive backfield with Desmond Trufant. The likelihood is Brock Osweiler will be the starter, where Brody Croyle was the starter last year. Osweiler had 2 games at the end of the year. So we will see how that turns out. Last year they went with Justin Blackman with their first round pick. This year they go on the other side of the ball instead of the wide receiver room. They're going with the DB guarding the wide receiver. Then we have the Atlanta Falcons, who are picking. I probably should have put the little note there that the 6th pick came from Seattle. But either way, this Atlanta Falcons, using the pick they acquired, because they were a playoff team, but they were picking top 6, go with Le'Veon Bell at halfback at pick 6. So this is a very high spot to take a running back, but it was one of their biggest needs. They lose Willis McGahee in free agency, but he was older and he was getting some regression taking place. And their free agency was pretty slow. They had Rich Ornberger, the guard for the AFC champion Colts, and Jamal Lord, a running back that's more older. They needed that. They have a difficult cap space because Peyton Manning costs a lot of money. And then Fitzgerald was giving me a hard time, so we franchise tagged him. And so Fitzgerald took a lot of money. So with limited cap space, I need to find playmakers for this team. And so the Falcons may have reached on Le'Veon Bell, but I think when it comes down to actually playing, I think it's the right choice. Then the Cowboys select Barkevious Mingo, left outside linebacker. So the Dallas Cowboys are in the toughest division of football, where the Packers and Bears are tough in the north. The NFC East has the Eagles, who just won the Super Bowl. They have the Commanders with Michael Vick, who've always been challenging. The New York Giants, who made 2 Super Bowls in a row. They still have Carson Palmer. They're a solid team there. Dallas is a talented team, but they have a hard time winning games. They were 7-10 for 4 straight years. This year, they snapped that trend to go 6-11, so they got worse. But they do still have Kyle Shanahan. But right now, they just wanted to get more talent on their defense after signing Daniel Ellerbe, Vance Walker. They did sign wide receivers, Derek Hagan, running back Steve Slayton. But they wanted to get best player available, and that at this point in mind was Barkevious Mingo, the speedy outside linebacker, kind of more lightweight. And as a Browns fan, I know I wasn't really thrilled when the Cleveland Browns got him, but Dallas makes that decision. And despite the challenges Dallas has, they now have some really good pieces, from Russell Wilson to Adrian Peterson, who's been their long-standing running back. I know that was a big dream of Cowboys fans to have Peterson play for them. They have solid receivers. They still have Jason Witten. They have some playmakers on defense. So they've got a lot of pieces. They just have to find a way to overcome a very tough division. Now, as we look at the New York Jets, this is another team that really underperformed. They have so much talent, and this is this is Jets. Excuse me. This is the Jets, and this is now Chip Kelly's Jets because he's now the new head coach. They recently signed Mike Jennings at cornerback from Green Bay, Lee Evans, and tight end Brandon Myers. But with that 8th overall pick, the Jets decided to bring in cornerback D. Milliner. This was a real-life pick for them. It made sense because they need some better defensive backs. So D. Milliner is supposed to come in and be that star caliber cornerback in New York so that they can defend against Tom Brady and the likes of whoever the Bills end up using at quarterback. They still have Ponder, but we'll see if that sticks for much longer. And then, let's see. The Buffalo Bills, same division. The Bills are on the clock with the 9th overall pick, and the Bills select Jonathan Cooper, right guard. So Cooper was seen as our top talented guard, one of the best in many years. So the Bills decide to strengthen their interior defensive line after they signed Richie Incognito. They signed Ryan Cook, Tony Fanotti. But despite those picks, they decided they really want to invest younger, and they think Jonathan Cooper can be a long-term answer for their inside line. They also brought in DeAndre Levy, Nick Bellore, Nick Barnett as linebackers. And so with this pick, they just try to help their blocking game with Jonathan Cooper. And with the 10th overall pick, the New Orleans Saints select Geno Smith, quarterback. So unlike in real life when it was E.J. Manuel that came off the board for the Buffalo Bills in like the 16th or 18th overall pick, Geno Smith didn't get picked till the second round. The Saints, under new head coach Pat Shurmur, need a new quarterback. They traded Tim Tebow away, I believe it was to the Buffalo Bills. And so the quarterback is a desperate need. They missed out on Tavares Jackson. They missed out on some of the quarterbacks in free agency. They do sign Byron Leftwich, the veteran that did make the Super Bowl with the Buccaneers. So he joins them as maybe a mentor or maybe a bridge quarterback. I don't know if Geno Smith will start right away. He might be sitting behind Byron Leftwich for a few games, but he is the plan for Pat Shurmur and the New Orleans Saints. Then we go to the 11th overall selection, and with this pick, the Tennessee Titans select Xavier Rhodes. So the Titans have some pieces on their team. However, they still have Josh Freeman at quarterback. They signed Tavares Jackson, so they were the ones that beat out the Saints and a few other teams for Tavares, as Tavares leaves Houston to go to the rival Titans. And he's bounced around the league. Tavares Jackson's somewhat good enough to get you into the playoffs, but not good enough to win you many playoff games. So they decide that they want to invest in defensive backs, so they signed cornerback Xavier Rhodes, very top talented cornerback in this draft, probably one of the best ones, actually. And so he ends up going to the Titans. Then you have the Minnesota Vikings. And with the 12th overall selection, the Vikings select Sheldon Richardson, defensive tackle. So again, in that very tough division, they ended up bringing in, it was RG3 as quarterback last year with their first pick. They are under a new head coach as of last season, so in his sophomore year, Perry Fewell. But we see here that the Vikings decide to help their interior line by going with Sheldon Richardson. Good selection there for them. Then the St. Louis Rams, with the 13th overall pick, select Travis Frederick, the center. So again, this is a good pick for the Rams, really fixing that interior offensive line. They were able to bring Randy McMichael in, a tight end. They have Chris Jenkins, who was with the Panthers. I forget where he was last year. I know he hopped. I don't remember where he was. But anyway, they have a few additions there, but Travis Frederick is going to be a long-term center for them, so good choice for St. Louis. Then you got the Oakland Raiders with 14th overall pick, and Hugh Jackson. The Raiders select Star Lotulelei, defensive tackle. So the Raiders are in that division where they were 8-9. They were close to the playoffs, just slightly behind the Steelers, who were 9-8. The Dolphins were 8-9 as well. So getting Star Lotulelei, he was seen as one of the really top defensive tackles in this draft class. They do bring in Connor Barwin, Lance Briggs, and Darian Stewart in free agency. So really helping on the defense has been their goal this offseason. They are sticking with Matt Ryan at quarterback. They have Sean Green at running back. Julio Jones at wide receiver. They've got a lot of good options on offense, so this was a good pickup for them on defense. Then the Arizona Cardinals, with the 15th overall pick under new head coach John DeFilippo, go with cornerback Darius Slay Jr. So we know Darius Slay Jr. was kind of an underranked cornerback in this draft, but he ended up becoming quite the superstar in real life. So good for the Cardinals in anchoring their defensive backfield. They did sign Mike Wallace, the biggest free agent wide receiver. They signed two old defensive ends in Jared Allen and Justin Smith. They bring in running back Beanie Wells and cornerback Darius Butler. And despite bringing in Darius Butler, who is young and was very talented, like 5th or 6th string on the team he was previously on, Darius Slay has some time to develop, maybe get some reps, maybe be the nickel cornerback for a bit as he develops into his starting role. Then we have the Miami Dolphins on the clock, and with that 16th overall pick, the Dolphins select tight end Tyler Eifert. So after getting rid of Dustin Keller the past year, they were kind of a void at tight end. And so they really needed some help there. And so they did sign Chris Cooley, who is not very good overall-wise. They brought in Troy Smith as a backup for Cam Newton, and they signed a kicker as well. And so not a very big splash in free agency, despite the fact that last year they had Calvin Johnson Jr. and Matt Forte. So they spent a lot of money earlier, but bringing Tyler Eifert in is the best tight end in the draft, at least as it seems at this point in the draft. So they bring in the best tight end. So big success for them in this draft on that selection. Then the New York Giants are on the clock with the 17th overall pick, and the Giants select Luke Joeckel, who really slipped in my draft. When I look at the other teams, there just was not a team that made sense for him to go to that point. I probably could have drafted him earlier, maybe made him a guard, but I was really looking for a team that needs a left tackle. And although the Giants don't need a left tackle, they do have Eugene Monroe. I just thought it was too good to pass up because Eugene Monroe, if he decides maybe I move Luke Jokel to left guard, and the Giants who are trying to, they were just outside of the playoff picture, if they get that boost on the O-line to help with blocking for Carson Palmer, for that run game with Ryan Matthews, Luke Jokel is a good selection there. Then you've got the Washington Commanders, and with the Commanders on the clock, they go with left tackle Lane Johnson. So the NFC East is really boosting their offensive line. Lane Johnson going with the Commanders. I know, sorry, Eagles fans, those of you who love Lane Johnson, he's going to Washington. This is another move where they actually did kind of need a left tackle, and the fact that they were picking this late and he was still there made a lot of sense to me. I don't think the O-line in Madden regresses appropriately, which is why it's so hard to replace them. Because why would I replace a left tackle that's 75 overall with a rookie that's 70 or 72? You normally stick with what you have if it's working for you and better. So right here, we're getting 2 top 5 tackles in real life coming off the board on the 17th and 18th pick. Now with the Carolina Panthers on the clock, they are sticking with Flacco, quarterback. They did sign Brody Croyle as a solid backup for them. They have Michael Okwo, who was with the Eagles for a while, Cowboys for a while, Dan Connolly at center. But with the 19th overall pick, the Panthers decided to bring in middle linebacker Manti Te'o. So he was one of the better linebacker prospects at this time. He didn't really pan out in real life, but he is going to be a solid contributor for the Panthers defense, which used to be number 1 for many years. John Fox was like coach of the year 4 out of 5 seasons or 3 out of 4 seasons. Pretty crazy, but their defense took a big hit last year. Still a good team. They were still 9-8 and they made the playoffs. However, they really need to rebuild their defense after a lot of their star players either left or aged out, retired, whatever. Like DeMarcus Ware's now with Green Bay. Chris Jenkins went to Oakland, and he went to whatever team he went to in free agency, or the Rams. So they have a lot of people that they lost. Manti Te'o is there to help bring some youth to this powerhouse defense. Then with the 20th overall selection, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who had a very busy free agency, signing people like Clint Sessions and Aaron Mabin, Sammy Hill on defense. They bring in Jared Cook, a tight end that was a top tight end from Baltimore, and they already have Delaney Walker, who's one of the best in the league. He's probably the equivalent of the Jason Witten, Antonio Gates level for Pittsburgh in my franchise. But we have Jared Cook, even Kevin Cobb as a backup because Anderson wanted a lot of money to be the backup, Derek Anderson. But Pittsburgh was pretty busy this offseason, and with that 20th overall pick, the Steelers select defensive tackle Sharif Floyd. So they bring in the big man up front on defense. I think this is a great selection for them. They are a powerhouse defense. They have Dante Whitner, who is the best safety in the league. They have some great pieces across that defensive side. Now they add Sharif Floyd. Great selection for them. And now we have the Denver Broncos, who I was pretty close to getting rid of Sam Bradford. And I guess he still has 1 more year left on his contract, but he has not been replaced because he made the playoffs. So that was a big shock to me. They bring in like Cameron Wake, Jason Allen, Johnny Jolly on defense, David Boz, Zach Miller at tight end. Matt Schaub is there. He was brought in. I forget which team he was on last year. I think it might have been he was the backup for Blaine Gabbert in Tampa Bay, and he comes in as the backup for Sam Bradford, who Matt Schaub could potentially be a potential starter if Sam Bradford reverts to his old terrible self. But here we have the Denver Broncos with the 21st overall selection, selecting Zach Ertz. So I think this is huge for Denver. They have A.J. Green. They have very solid offensive opportunity here. And now they bring in Zach Ertz, one of the best tight ends in the league, as we know, in recent years with the Eagles, now going to Denver. Then with the 22 overall pick, the Green Bay Packers select Sylvester Williams, defensive tackle. So not sure about this pick, but they needed some help on the defensive front. They do bring in Bradley Fletcher, Cedric Ellis, Jason McCourty, Frank Zombo, who's an outside linebacker, Jason Jones at DT. A lot of defensive mindedness has come in with Green Bay, specific with the Sylvester Williams pick. they're set with LeSean McCoy at running back, and maybe they could use a better backup running back. But they have Matthew Stafford. Wide receivers, they have Antonio Brown, Julian Edelman, some really top-notch people. And so bringing in Sylvester Williams, good defensive addition for them, at least in their minds. However, I know in real life, I don't think Sylvester Williams was really that great overall as a player compared for first-round talent. Next up, we're going to have the Houston Texans. Texans just brought in quarterback Mark Sanchez after they lost Tavares Jackson. They have Earl Bennett, Chris Clemens, Jason Snelling, Mike McGlynn, and then my man Jeff Smoker, quarterback. But with this 23rd overall pick, Houston decides to bring in wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. So there was many teams I thought could take Hopkins, and I try to follow as much as possible that what made sense with what they needed, and try not to be too cheesy with it. But when I saw the Houston Texans were up and they need a wide receiver, I just thought, okay, Texans fans, I can give you what you're looking for. So DeAndre Hopkins joins Houston in the first round like he did in real life, and I think it was the right fit at the right time. So what's going to be a wonderful pick for the Houston Texans. Next up, we have the San Francisco 49ers, and with the 24th overall pick, the Niners select right guard Kyle Long. This might sound like a boring pick, but they did sign Lee Charles Bentley and Dan Copen as two offensive linemen, and they likely will start because they're good linemen, but maybe not Dan Copen, maybe. But we have Kyle Long there because there's a lot of age on the 49ers offensive line, so Kyle Long is going to be that potential starter right out of the gate, along with just kind of being the replacement to transition out of some of the older O-linemen that San Francisco has. And this team is loaded. They've got Drew Brees. They lost Arian Foster, but they still have like Dion Lewis. They still have some weapons on the running game. But then it was the wide receiver room with Alshon Jeffrey, and they have Des Bryant. Tight end is Brent Selleck, who's been very solid for them. So they needed some help on the O-line, and that's what Kyle Long provides. Then the Atlanta Falcons on the clock again. So last time they picked Le'Veon Bell. This time they select right tackle DJ Fluker. So tackle was a potential need for them. However, I wanted it on the right side, and I wasn't going to take a right tackle or the non-blind side blocker with the #1 overall pick. They probably could have drafted Lane Johnson or Luke Jokel and moved him to right outside or right tackle. But I saw DJ Fluker sitting there, and I thought I'm probably not going to get to him for a while. So he did fall in the draft. So the Falcons get their right tackle, but more importantly, they get the playmaker they wanted, which was Le'Veon Bell. Then we look at the Chicago Bears, who were also busy in this free agency. They signed the best right guard in the league, or in free agency, Jari Evans. They had two tight ends, Daniel Fells, Chase Kaufman, running back Justin Forsett, cornerback Sean Smith, Henry Melton, right end, Jamar Williams, outside linebacker. Jay Cutler goes to Chicago, so sorry, Chicago fans. But with the 26th overall pick, the Bears draft left end Bjorn Werner. Everyone knows this pick did not work out for the Colts, but the Bears are trying to help their defense, and Werner is seen as the best player available at this point on defense, and especially on the defensive front, so that pass rusher, and we'll see if that actually pans out or not. Then we have the Seattle Seahawks, who are picking in place of the Cleveland Browns. So Seattle moved up with the 6th overall pick, which was their original pick, to get the Falcons pick, and they trade a second rounder to move up because there's not that much talent. It's not like they were moving up for the all-star superstar cornerback. So instead, what we have here is the Cleveland Browns, who gave up their first-round pick for Troy Polamalu, the long-standing safety for the Seahawks, who was the Rookie of the Year. He's been a solid player his entire career for the Seahawks. I try to create like a Legion of Boom kind of atmosphere with Troy Polamalu, and then the pass rush of Mario Williams. But the Seahawks had one good season. That was pretty much it. But with this 27th overall pick, the additional draft pick brings the Seattle Seahawks cornerback DJ Hayden. So that might be more of an underwhelming pick for Seattle fans, but this is just where they had the extra pick. They're going to go with the best player available, and they thought defensive backs are where you can always take a shot at a cornerback because you can never have enough good cornerbacks. So Hayden comes in to help their defensive backfield. Then you got the Patriots. Now, the Patriots lost several key members because they have bad salary cap, but they were able to bring back some key players, and they were able to bring back someone like, or they lost Sebastian Vollmer, but brought in, let's see, who was it? They brought in Zach Strief from Baltimore. But with this 20th overall pick, the Patriots are able to draft left guard Chance Warmack. So the Patriots had some aging O-linemen because they had some solid O-linemen for many years. They've started to part ways with them. So Chance Warmack, who slips in this draft to the late rounds, the late first round, excuse me, they bring in Chance Warmack, and I think that's a great selection for them to help that offensive line. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock. They actually surprised me more than I thought in how they were able to be the number one team for a while, then falling to like the second seed. Again, Darren McFadden, 2,000 yards rushing, just absolutely a clinic. And with that 29th pick, the Buccaneers select defensive tackle Kawan Short. So they go defense with this pick. They went with Louis Delmas in free agency as free safety, Bruce Davis at linebacker, and Ryan Torain at running back to be a backup for McFadden. So they went with one of the best players available in the front seven of defense, and that was Kawan Short. Then the San Diego Chargers, who seem to have Aaron Rodgers' symptoms of being able to make the playoffs every year, be a top team every year, but lose in the playoffs. Now, their biggest acquisition was Arian Foster from the San Francisco 49ers. So that big spark is going to be better than Beanie Wells and their running back core the past few years, and since LaDainian Tomlinson before his gruesome injury. But so Foster is able to come in as the star running back. They bring in Mike Mitchell at safety and Ashley Palmer at outside linebacker. And so with this 30th overall pick, the Chargers help their team by drafting right outside linebacker Jamie Collins Sr., one of the best. I think he was the best ranked outside linebacker in this draft, other than maybe Mingo. And so they get a really solid player here for this defense that is going to be going up against tough teams. Like the Colts, like the Patriots, and so forth, just trying to get over the edge into the Super Bowl. Then you have the Indianapolis Colts. They had a slower free agency. They lost a lot of players. Leonard Weaver, the fullback, joins them to replace John Kuhn. They bring in Robert James at middle linebacker, and then Gabe Watson at defensive tackle. But with that 31st overall pick, the Indianapolis Colts select Cordero Patterson, wide receiver and maybe running back. I haven't decided how all I want to play with him, but we look at Reggie Wayne. He's an aging wide receiver. Victor Cruz was drafted by them. Never really amounted to being the explosive receiver we knew of him as when he was with the Giants. Let's see, who else do they have? They have Pierre Garçon, but they needed some spark. They needed some talent, and I thought Cordero Patterson elevates this team and gives them another solid weapon as they try to win the Super Bowl next year. And then you have the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champions. I thought that McNabb at 36 years old was going to retire, or at 35, but he turns 36 this year, and he decided that he wants to go another round. So they didn't need an immediate replacement for him at quarterback, because I was planning on this pick being that important of a selection. But we see like Landon Cone that they signed, Fernando Velasco on offensive line, Jamon Meredith. But with this 32nd overall pick, the Eagles do select halfback Giovanni Bernard. So after Le'Veon Bell goes in the top 6, the Eagles have Frank Gore at running back, who's definitely getting older. And then they lost Tim Hightower last year to the St. Louis Rams, their solid backup. And then they were dealing with Alfred Morris, who was like a 56, 57 overall. They had some other 50 overall running back because they were stripped on a challenge at cap space. So they need a transition off of Frank Gore, and Giovanni Bernard is going to be a great spark plug for the Philadelphia Eagles. So there you have the very first round of the draft. We were able to get this done in less than 32 minutes, so that was less than a minute per team. So thank you for watching this video. If you like Madden content and you like this 32-team franchise, please subscribe to this channel, like the video. Next up, we'll be going over the individual teams and how their draft went and who they went with. So thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.